What's going on, guys? I'm Frank. This is Ratchet and Frank TV. Today is a beautiful day. Not really, but it's my 21st birthday, so it's as beautiful as ever. Today we're gonna go ahead and tear into this Lowe's trailer and make our own custom motocross hauler. First thing we want to do is we want to pull these tires off. So let's get an air gun out and let's zing them off real quick.
It's important when you're changing your rim size, you follow the already pre-existing bolt pattern. Most trailer hubs typically have 4 or 5 lugs per wheel, but the higher capacity trailers generally have closer to 6 or 8 lugs. If your wheel has an odd bolt pattern, measure from the back of one bolt hole to the center of the bolt hole diagonal from it. The two most common patterns are 4 on 4 and 5 on 4.5. Our wheel has a 5 bolt pattern with a pitch circle diameter of 4.5, so we will define it as being 5 on 4.5. The first thing we're going to do to the trailer is remove the wheel wells and make room for bigger ones that I'll fabricate myself. For most of the fabrication, I'm going to be using 1/8 inch angled steel. This is the same thickness of steel that's already on the trailer. With the wheel wells out of the way, we can turn our attention towards the flimsy chain link base. I'm going the route of removing it entirely and begin the process with an angle grinder and cutoff wheel. I eventually decided that the grinder was making too much of a mess of the steel the deck was mounted to, so I swapped to a pair of metal cutters to finish the job, then quickly ground down whatever was left.
Yesterday, we cut the miniature wheel wells off this thing and pulled the existing deck off of it. Today, we're going to reinforce the trailer chassis entirely and fabricate some new wheel wells. Theoretically, as long as you're following the existing bolt pattern, you could put as big of a rim as you want on the trailer. Where you're going to run into issues is the tire clearance between the rim itself. So you have to make sure you choose a tire that won't hit the trailer itself when you put it onto the axle. We went from a rim with a width of 4.8 inches and a diameter of 12 to a rim with 15 inches diameter and a width of 5.5.
When removing the wells, I cut off a few more inches than I actually needed to, so I'm going to add 8 inches on both sides. These are the pieces I will use to make the upward angles of the wheel wells. I already have the second set made, so let's move on to mounting. For the 1/8 inch angled steel, I am using Fleet Weld 180 3/32 rods at 75 amps. Oh yeah. I'm using a dual cutoff grinding wheel here to trim the excess metal and begin getting the basic rounded shape of the wheel wells. You can see right here that when I cut the top bar to angle, it left a gap, and the gap ended up being pretty big, especially when I struck my first arc, the thinner metal melted right away. But using a small thin piece of steel I trimmed off earlier, I corrected the gap with a few passes. Now we'll switch back to a full wheel and get to grinding these welds for the first time. When I'm doing this, you'll notice I'm not only stripping off excess material, slag and spatter, I'm grinding to the root of the weld and in the process preparing them for a full set of passes. Be careful as to not grind too deep or you'll end up blowing out the metal and having to fix it. This happened to me and you'll see it shortly. I referred to a set of passes earlier. By set of passes, I mean a certain amount of times I'm going to pass the electrode over the metal and lay material. First you'll see me lay what's referred to as the stringer bead, followed by a hot pass, then the filler pass or passes. A cover bead or cap is usually laid on top of all of it. This is where I blew out the metal because I had grinded too deep. Luckily it was in the center and not on the outside, so it wasn't difficult to fix. We'll pick the grinder up for another pass over these wells, this time giving the edges a simple rounded out look. In the next part, we're going to redo all the factory welds that were already on the trailer, add more support for the upper rail, and talk about different options for a base.
As always, thank you guys for watching. This has been another episode of Ratchet and Frank TV.